It was a dreary afternoon when I first set eyes on the Hawthorne Mansion, my so-called inheritance. I had received a letter not 3 weeks prior, written in elegant but somewhat shaky script, informing me that a distant relative, whom I had never met nor heard of, had left me their estate. This was surprising, to say the least, considering my family's modest and rather unremarkable history. The mansion itself was located on the outskirts of a small, unassuming town draped in fog more often than not. As my car crept along the narrow, winding road that led to the mansion, the trees seemed to lean closer, as if curious about the newcomer or perhaps issuing a silent warning. I remember laughing to myself, a laugh that carried a tinge of nervous energy. It was the kind of laugh that one uses to fend off the growing unease that comes with stepping into a story that feels like it has been lifted straight from the pages of a Gothic novel. The estate was imposing, a towering structure of gray stones and ivy-clad walls that loomed against the skyline like a sentinel from another era. The iron gates groaned in protest as I pushed them open, their creaks echoing eerily through the silent air. The path to the front door was overgrown, the once manicured bushes and flowers now wild and untamed. Nature, it seemed, was intent on reclaiming this place. As I approached the front door, with its intricate woodwork and a large brass knocker in the middle, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. I told myself it was just the isolation of the place, the kind of isolation that makes every shadow and every sound seem magnified. The interior of the mansion was no less daunting. The grand foyer was shrouded in dust and draped in cobwebs. Faint rays of the waning sun filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colorful yet somber patterns on the floor. The air was stale, filled with the scent of old wood and a hint of mildew. As I ventured further, the house seemed to wake from its slumber, the floorboards creaking under my steps, the whispers of the past rustling in the tattered curtains. My exploration led me to the library, a vast room with shelves stretching from floor to ceiling, filled with books that likely hadn't been touched in decades. That's where I found a diary, its leather cover cracked and pages yellowed with age. It belonged to Elizabeth Hawthorne, a name that rang no bells in my mind but carried with it a weight, a significance that I felt in my bones. Curiosity piqued, I settled into an armchair that puffed up a cloud of dust at my intrusion. As I flipped through the pages, Elizabeth's words pulled me into the whirlpool of her life. She wrote of love, of betrayal, and of a darkness that had seeped into the mansion, a darkness that was palpable even now. The last entry was abrupt, ending in a mid-sentence, as if she had been interrupted. A sudden chill swept through the room, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I could swear I heard a whisper, my name carried across the void by a voice both sad and sinister. Heart-pounding, I stood and approached the mirror that hung over the fireplace. My reflection stared back at me, but there, in the corner of the glass, was the fleeting image of a woman, her expression tormented. She vanished as quickly as she had appeared, leaving me breathless and alone. Or so I hoped. The logical part of my brain urged me to leave, to escape what was clearly the beginning of a nightmare. But another part, perhaps the part that had inherited not just a house but a legacy of unresolved mysteries, decided to stay. At least for one night. That decision, made in the fading light of that first visit, would lead me down a path darker and more twisted than the overgrown approach to Hawthorne Mansion. Little did I know, my life was about to change forever. As night fell, the mansion seemed to close in around me. The wind howled like the cries of the damned, and as I prepared to retire to what would hopefully be the safety of the master bedroom, the true nature of my inheritance began to reveal itself. Shadows flickered in the periphery of my vision, each one whispering secrets of the past, beckoning me deeper into the mystery of Hawthorne Mansion. The first night in Hawthorne Mansion was a cacophony of creaks and groans that seemed almost communicative in nature, as if the house itself was attempting to speak, to convey messages from decades long silenced. It was in these small, quiet hours, when the world outside seemed to have paused and the wind's whispers softened, that the true eerie essence of the mansion began to manifest. Every shadow seemed to stretch with intent, every gust of wind through the broken panes of glass seemed to carry voices. I found myself lying in the master bedroom, which was adorned with heavy, moth-eaten drapes and a canopy bed that seemed more a relic than a place of rest, wrapped in layers of blankets that did little to ward off the chill or my growing unease. The fireplace in the room was long cold, the ashes of countless forgotten fires left undisturbed. I had considered trying to start a fire, but the thought of the noise, the scraping of metal and strike of match, seemed somehow inappropriate, an unwelcome disturbance to the heavy silence that lay over the house like a shroud. My attempts at sleep were feeble, and as the hours dragged by, the house seemed to grow restless with me. The air grew colder, and from downstairs, I heard the unmistakable sound of someone pacing, the floorboards protesting under the weight of unseen feet. I told myself it was just the house settling, as old houses are wont to do, but the pacing was too rhythmic, too intentional. Then, amidst the ambient noise of the house's groaning, I heard a whisper. Not just the wind, not just the creaking of wood, but a clear, distinct whisper. My name, Alex, breathed so softly, yet carrying across the great distance of the mansion's corridors straight to my ears. My breath caught in my throat, and I sat up, straining my ears against the darkness. Again, Alex, this time followed by what sounded like a sob, a mournful, heartbroken cry that seemed both far away and all too close. Fueled by a mixture of fear and an insatiable need for answers, I threw off the blankets and stepped onto the cold floor. The house was darker now, the moon obscured by clouds, and as I made my way out of the bedroom, the air felt thick, as if charged with static. Each step seemed louder, more pronounced, as I descended the staircase to the main floor where the whisper had originated. The library door was ajar, and as I approached, the air grew inexplicably colder. I pushed the door open, half expecting to see someone, something, but the room was empty, or so it seemed. The diary I had found earlier lay open on the floor as if it had been dropped in haste. I bent to pick it up, and as my fingers brushed the leather cover, the room grew impossibly silent. The house seemed to be holding its breath. Flipping to the last page I had read, the words seemed to blur before my eyes, and then, without warning, the fireplace flared to life with a sudden whoosh, the flames casting dancing shadows across the room. In the light of the fire, the mirror above the mantel drew my gaze. I watched, frozen, as a figure materialized in the reflection, a woman, her features marred by sorrow, her eyes meeting mine. There was no malice in her gaze, only immense sadness and a pleading urgency. She reached out, her hand pressing against the glass, and her mouth moved as if she was speaking, but no sound came through. Then, as quickly as she had appeared, she vanished, leaving behind the echo of her sorrow and the faint scent of roses. My heart pounded in my chest, my mind raced with questions. Who was she? What did she want with me? Why this house? The answers, I knew, lay somewhere within the walls of this forsaken mansion, hidden in the whispers in the dark. With a newfound resolve, I knew I could not leave Hawthorne Mansion, not yet, not until I uncovered its secrets, and so, with the diary clutched tightly in hand, I made my way back to the library, determined to discover the truth, no matter how dark it might be. With the haunting image of the woman in the mirror etched firmly in my mind, sleep became an elusive companion. Instead, I found myself driven by an inexorable pull towards the mysteries enshrouded within the walls of Hawthorne Mansion. The morning light did little to dispel the shadows that lingered in the corners of the house or the chill that seemed to seep into my bones, yet it was under this pale, unyielding sunlight that I made the decision to delve deeper, to seek out someone who could perhaps communicate with the spirits still tethered to this place. The local town, a mere speck on the map, held a small occult shop nestled between an abandoned railway station and a decrepit bookshop. It was there I met Madame Sybil, a medium known amongst the townsfolk both for her insightful readings and her intimate knowledge of the supernatural. Her reputation was a blend of skepticism and genuine fear, but desperation led me to her door, a door adorned with symbols that spoke of protection and ancient rites. Madame Sybil agreed to assist me, albeit with a cautionary note that some spirits were best left undisturbed. She spoke from experience, her eyes holding stories that she chose not to voice, her fingers lightly touching the crystal pendant that hung from her neck, a talisman against unseen dangers. The séance was set for midnight, the witching hour, when the veil between worlds is thinnest, Madame Sybil insisted that the mansion's own energies would aid in making contact with the spirits, particularly the woman who had so vividly appeared to me. As the clock struck 12, we gathered in the library, the site of my spectral encounter, with candles casting quivering shadows against the walls, the flames flickering as if in anticipation. Madame Sybil began by forming a circle of salt around us, a barrier she explained was both for our protection and to contain the energy within. Her voice, when she began to chant, was a soft murmur, words from a language I did not know, her tone melodic yet commanding. The air grew thick, the candles dimmed, and a coldness descended upon us, so profound that I could see my breath misting in the air before me. "Elizabeth," Madame Sybil called into the shadows, her voice now strong and clear, "we seek your presence, we wish to communicate." The response was almost immediate, a gust of wind despite the still air, the pages of books fluttering like the wings of birds taking flight. Then, silence, a heavy, expectant silence that filled the room until a voice, faint and distant, called back, "Help me." The candles flared as if in response, and the temperature dropped further, the chill seeping into my very marrow. "Who harms you?" Madame Sybil asked, her eyes closed as she focused on the space before her. "He waits in the darkness," the voice replied, a whisper of dread that made my skin crawl. "He binds us." As the medium pressed for more details, a loud crash echoed through the mansion, as if something had been shattered. Madame Sybil's eyes flew open, her hand raised in a halting gesture. "We must stop," she said abruptly, her voice tinged with fear. "Something is wrong, there is a malevolence here that does not wish to be disturbed." She began to chant again, quicker now, her words a rapid stream meant to close whatever door we had unwittingly opened. The candles extinguished themselves one by one, as if snuffed out by an unseen hand, and the room plunged into darkness, save for the moonlight that crept through the windows, casting long, sinister shadows across the floor. We sat in silence, the only sound our ragged breaths and the distant rumble of thunder that seemed to mock our fright. Madame Sybil's final words before she left were a warning: "Be careful, Alex, not all spirits seek salvation, some revel in damnation." Her departure left me in a tumult of thoughts. The mansion now felt more alive than ever, its secrets whispered in every creak and groan of its structure, and as I lit a lone candle, watching the flames struggle against the darkness, I knew that I could not leave, not yet, not until I had uncovered who he was and how to free Elizabeth and the others bound to this cursed place. With renewed resolve, despite the terror that clung to the fringes of my mind, I prepared to delve into the mansion's past, to scour every document, every book until I found the answers that I sought, the answers that would perhaps lead to my own salvation or ensnare me further in the mansion's spectral clutches. The restless night following the aborted seance was filled with the relentless pursuit of knowledge as I dove into the vast collection of mold-scented tomes and scattered papers that littered the mansion's library. My quest was not just for answers but for understanding, a desperate attempt to piece together the history of Hawthorne Mansion and the enigmatic figures who had once called this place home. The books were old, their pages brittle and foxed, and they spoke of a time when the mansion was not a mere relic of despair but a vibrant home filled with life and laughter, a stark contrast to the somber walls that now seemed to absorb every sliver of light. As dawn broke, its weak rays struggling to penetrate the thick canopy of the forest surrounding the mansion, I came across an old leather-bound ledger buried beneath a stack of faded newspapers. The ledger was a record of the house's history, each entry penned in meticulous handwriting that detailed not just the mundane occurrences of daily life but also the darker moments that seemed to accumulate like storm clouds on the horizon. The ledger revealed that the mansion had been built by Abraham Hawthorne, a man whose name was synonymous with both wealth and tragedy. His family had been plagued by misfortune, from untimely deaths to unexplained disappearances, and it was his youngest daughter, Elizabeth, who had suffered the most. Elizabeth, the voice from the seance, the apparition in the mirror, her life had been a tapestry of sorrow, woven with threads of loss and betrayal. Her entries in the ledger painted a portrait of a woman both resilient and broken, a woman who had loved deeply and lost tragically. Her husband, Jonathan, had died under mysterious circumstances, and her grief had been so profound that she had sought the help of a medium, much like I had, to contact his spirit. However, unlike my own experience, her attempts had led to something sinister being unleashed within the mansion, a presence that had never fully left. Armed with this new information, my investigation took on a new direction. I scoured the mansion for any physical evidence that might have survived the passage of time, my search leading me to the attic, a place I had avoided, its very atmosphere heavy with the echoes of the past. The attic was cluttered with trunks and boxes, each covered in a thick layer of dust, as if untouched for decades. Amidst these relics of the past, I found a small wooden chest, its surface carved with symbols that I recognized from the books as protective wards. Inside the chest were letters, photographs, and a journal, the latter belonging to the medium Elizabeth had consulted. The journal was cryptic, filled with references to rituals and spirits, but one passage stood out, a passage that spoke of a room within the mansion, a room that was not bound by the physical laws of our world, a room that had been sealed after an experiment gone horrifically wrong. My heart racing with both excitement and fear, I took the journal and descended from the attic, my path now clear. I needed to find this room, this nexus of supernatural energy, and uncover what had been sealed away. The search for the hidden room was grueling, each corridor and each room meticulously examined, the mansion gradually revealing its secrets as if recognizing my resolve. It was in the basement, behind a false wall, that I finally found it, the hidden room, its door marked with the same symbols that were on the chest in the attic. Pushing the door open, I stepped inside, the air stale and cold, as if this part of the house had been cut off from the world for ages. The room was small, the walls lined with more symbols, their meanings obscure but their intent clear, to contain, to protect. At the center of the room was an altar, and upon it lay an array of objects that were clearly ritualistic in nature, among them a dagger, a ring, and a book, its cover adorned with a pentagram. I approached the altar cautiously, the weight of the air around me growing heavier with each step, the shadows seeming to coil around my feet like living things. As I reached out to touch the book, the house trembled, a low rumble that felt like a warning, but my need for answers overrode my fear. I opened the book, the pages filled with incantations and drawings that pulsed with a malevolent energy. The mansion groaned again, louder this time, the walls themselves seeming to protest as I read from the book, my voice barely above a whisper but each word echoing in the unnaturally still air. The ground shook, the tremors running through the floorboards and up through my bones, and I knew then that I had awakened something that had been sleeping in the depths of the mansion, waiting for a chance to rise again. Fear clutched at my heart, its icy fingers tightening with the realization of what I had done, but there was no turning back, not now, not when I was so close to the truth that might free Elizabeth and the other spirits trapped within these walls, or damn me to join them. As I stood in the hidden room, the air heavy with the palpable presence of something ancient and malevolent that had stirred from its slumber, my mind raced with the implications of the incantations I had unwittingly voiced from the aged book. The very foundations of the mansion seemed to respond, the walls whispering back in a chorus of groans and creaks that mirrored the turmoil within me. My hands trembled as I held the book, the pages seeming to throb with a life of their own, the cryptic symbols and dark illustrations swirling before my eyes as if they were trying to communicate directly with my soul. It was then that I stumbled upon a passage that detailed the origin of the curse, a curse that had been invoked by a witch scorned by the Hawthorne family, her vengeance reaching beyond the grave, binding the spirits of all who perished within the mansion to forever roam its halls, their peace tethered to her unyielding wrath. The text revealed that the curse could only be broken by destroying the talisman that contained her spirit, a talisman that had been hidden within the mansion, its location a mystery wrapped in riddles that seemed insurmountable. The urgency of the situation weighed heavily upon me, the shadows in the room stretching towards me like dark hands eager to pull me into their depths. Fueled by a desperate need to rectify my mistake and save the trapped spirits, including Elizabeth, whose plaintive whispers seemed to echo through the room, I set out to find the talisman, each step guided by the cryptic clues left in the witch's journal. My search led me through the bowels of the mansion, into rooms I had never dared to explore, rooms that felt untouched by time, their air thick with the scent of decay and secrets long buried. The mansion revealed its history in fragments, a portrait here, a faded letter there, each piece a puzzle that slowly formed a picture of the past, a past steeped in tragedy and dark dealings that had set the curse in motion. Hours turned into days as I delved deeper into the mansion's heart, the oppressive atmosphere testing my resolve, the constant whispers and fleeting shadows testing my sanity. It was in the depths of the mansion's old wine cellar, behind a wall that crumbled at my touch, that I found a small alcove, within it a chest that matched the description in the journal, its surface etched with symbols of warding and containment. With a mixture of trepidation and anticipation, I opened the chest to reveal the talisman, a small, intricately carved stone that pulsed with a dark energy, its surface cold yet seemingly alive under my fingertips. The moment I touched the talisman, the air around me chilled, and a scream, sharp and terrifying, split the silence, a sound so harrowing that it felt as though the very soul of the mansion was in agony. The ground beneath me shook, the walls around me cracked, as if the mansion itself was trying to prevent what I was about to do. I knew then that I had to act quickly, the witch's spirit aware of my intentions, her wrath manifesting in physical tremors that threatened to bring the mansion down upon me. Clutching the talisman, I ran from the cellar, the mansion's corridors a labyrinth that seemed to shift with my every turn, the darkness alive with the spirits of those bound to the witch's curse, their faces flickering in and out of the shadows, pleading for release. My heart pounded in my chest, my breaths ragged with fear and exertion as I made my way to the library, the very heart of the mansion, where I had first felt the pull of the supernatural. There, amidst the tomes and relics of a bygone era, I prepared for the ritual that would either free the spirits or bind me to the mansion forever. The book lay open on the pedestal, its pages fluttering as if caught in an unseen breeze, the words for the ritual waiting for me, a beacon in the darkness. As I began to recite the incantations, the talisman in my hand glowing with a sinister light, the air around me thickened, shadows swirling and coalescing into the figure of the witch, her visage twisted with hatred and malice. She was the heart of the curse, her spirit the anchor that held the souls of the mansion captive. Her shrieks filled the room, a sound that was both terrifying and pitiful, a sound that spoke of endless grief and fury. The witch lunged at me, her form flickering between solidity and smoke, her fingers clawing at the air, her eyes burning with a dark fire. I continued the incantations, my voice steady despite the chaos, the talisman burning hotter in my grasp, its power peaking as the final words left my lips. The witch's scream reached a crescendo, a sound that echoed through the mansion, through the very fibers of my being, before dissipating into a sudden silence that was as shocking as it was profound. The talisman shattered in my hand, its fragments glowing briefly before turning to ash, drifting to the ground like the final breath of a long-held sigh. The immediate threat may have been vanquished, but the darkness within the mansion had not been fully eradicated. As I stood in the silent library, the weight of my actions settling around me like a cloak, I knew that my journey was far from over. The curse was broken, but the shadows that lingered spoke of other secrets, other bindings that needed to be addressed. With the dawn creeping through the windows, casting light on the dust motes dancing in the air, I prepared myself for the next chapter of this haunting, a chapter that would delve deeper into the mysteries of Hawthorne Mansion, the specters of its past still whispering, still waiting. With the talisman shattered and the witch's screams still echoing in the hollows of the mansion, the atmosphere seemed to shift, the oppressive dread that had once permeated the air lifting slightly, yet not entirely dispelled, a testament to the deep-rooted darkness that still lurked within the walls of Hawthorne Mansion, my relief at having been ancient that perhaps had lain dormant, waiting for such a moment of weakness to arise. The library, once a sanctuary of knowledge and discovery, now felt like the epicenter of a much larger, more complex web of mysteries that the Hawthorne family had entangled themselves in over the centuries, the books and manuscripts, the letters and diaries all whispering secrets of a past riddled with occult practices and dealings with the dark arts, each piece of history a thread in the tapestry of tragedies that had befallen the family. As I delved deeper into the research, driven by a relentless need to understand the full extent of what I had unleashed, I discovered references to a series of rituals, conducted by the earliest Hawthorns, rituals that were intended to bring prosperity and protection but had instead opened doorways to realms that were better left unexplored, the consequences of which had reverberated through the generations, culminating in the curse that I had just broken. The mansion itself began to respond to the shift in energies, the hallways and rooms, once silent and brooding, now seemed alive with movement and sounds, the shadows deeper, more pronounced as if they were being drawn together, gathering strength, It was during one such night, when the moon was but a sliver in the sky and the stars were obscured by a gathering storm, that I felt the full force of the mansion's unrest, the air electric with anticipation, the wind howling through the broken windows, carrying with it the scent of rain and something else, something ancient and not quite of this world. I ventured out of the library, candle in hand, the flame flickering violently in the draught, casting eerie shadows on the walls, the portraits of the Hawthorne ancestors looking down upon me with eyes that seemed to flicker with a knowing glint, as if they were aware of the battles their progeny would face. The corridors of the mansion twisted before me, the architecture a maze of Gothic arches and hidden alcoves, each turn revealing parts of the mansion I had never seen before, rooms that were not on any floor plan, their doors creaking open as if inviting me in, the decor inside untouched by time, preserved as if in a moment of suspension, waiting for the spell to be broken. In one such room, deep within the east wing of the mansion, I found a mural painted on the ceiling, a sprawling depiction of the night sky, each constellation carefully detailed, the stars aligned in patterns that I recognized from the books as astrological symbols used in ancient rites, the mural a map of celestial alignments that the Hawthorns had used to time their rituals, the implications of which were both fascinating and horrifying. As I studied the mural, the room grew colder, the air around me thickening, a sense of being watched creeping up my spine, my candle the only source of light in the oppressive darkness, the shadows around me seeming to pulse with a life of their own, whispering in a language I could not understand but felt deep in my bones. The storm outside reached its crescendo, thunder shaking the foundations of the mansion, lightning illuminating the room in brief, stark flashes, each flash revealing more of the room's secrets, an altar beneath the mural, the surface scattered with ancient astrological instruments and faded parchments, the ink on them still vibrant, detailing observations of the stars and their supposed influence over the mortal realm. As I absorbed the information, piecing together the role of astrology in the Hawthorne family's legacy, the wind shifted, a gale force that rattled the windows, a flash of lightning so bright, so blinding that for a moment, everything was illuminated, the shadows retreating as if in fear, and in that moment of clarity, I realized that the mansion was not just a home, not just a place of tragedy and curse, but a gateway, a place of power that the Hawthorns had tapped into, their dealings with the celestial energies, a dangerous game that had tipped the balance of something much larger than themselves. With this new understanding, my resolve hardened, the pieces of the puzzle coming together in a picture that was as terrifying as it was compelling. I knew that to find peace, to truly free the spirits and myself from the mansion's hold, I would need to delve into the celestial secrets. To understand and perhaps realign what had been so recklessly tampered with. As the storm abated, leaving behind an unnerving calm, I prepared myself for the challenges ahead, the mansion's secrets no longer just whispers in the dark but a clear call to action, a call that I could not ignore, for the path to salvation, for both the spirits and my own soul, lay in understanding and perhaps correcting the celestial misalignments that had been set in motion centuries ago. The journey ahead daunting but necessary, the shadows my constant companions as I ventured deeper into the unknown, into the heart of the Hawthorne legacy. The final confrontation awaited as the dawn crept over the horizon, a pale light filtering through the storm clouds that had spent their rage over Hawthorne Mansion the night before, the air now suffused with a tense silence that seemed to be holding its breath, the mansion itself a sentinel against the slowly lightening sky, its windows like darkened eyes watching my every move. I stood in the library, the epicenter of so many revelations, surrounded by ancient tomes and manuscripts that had guided me through the labyrinthine history of the mansion, each book a piece of the puzzle that had slowly come together to reveal a tapestry woven with celestial alignments, dark rituals, and a curse that had bound the spirits of the Hawthorne family to these hallowed halls. The ritual to realign the celestial energies and truly free the spirits was complex, a series of incantations and symbols that needed to be precisely executed, the timing crucial, aligned with the dawn of a new day, the moment when light and dark battled for supremacy in the sky, a symbolic echo of the battle that was about to take place within the walls of the mansion. As I laid out the instruments and symbols around the astrological chart that had been so carefully preserved beneath the mural in the east wing, my hands trembled not from fear but from the weight of responsibility that pressed down upon me, each movement deliberate, knowing that the slightest misstep could condemn both the spirits and myself to eternal damnation within these walls. The incantations were in an ancient dialect, the words foreign but powerful as they rolled off my tongue, the air around me vibrating with the energy they conjured, the shadows in the corners of the room gathering, swirling as if agitated by the words that sought to undo centuries of darkness. As I spoke the final word of the incantation, the ground beneath me trembled, a low rumble that grew in intensity until the entire mansion shook, the sound akin to a growl of some great beast disturbed from its slumber. The shadows coalesced into a form, dark and terrifying, a manifestation of all the pain and anger that had festered within these walls, the spirits of the Hawthorns caught in its gravity, their faces appearing in the swirling darkness, eyes wide with fear or perhaps hope, their fates intertwined with the outcome of this ritual. The manifestation advanced, a chilling presence that sought to overwhelm me, to stop the ritual before it could complete, but I stood firm, the words of the incantation continuing to flow from me, a stream of light in the overwhelming darkness, each syllable a strike against the shadow that sought to envelop me. As the sun's first rays broke over the horizon, piercing the storm clouds with fingers of light that spilled through the windows and bathed the room in a golden glow, the shadow screamed, a sound so chilling it was as if the very air was being torn apart. The light grew stronger, the golden rays intensifying until they seemed to ignite the very air, the symbols around me glowing with a fierce light, a beacon against the darkness. With a final push of will, I completed the incantation, the symbols emitting a pulse of energy so powerful it felt as if the mansion itself was breathing a sigh of relief, the shadow before me writhing under the onslaught of light, its form dissipating, the spirits of the Hawthorns released from their bonds, their faces transforming from fear to peace as they were lifted up, disappearing into the light that now filled every corner of the room. The mansion settled, the trembling of the ground ceasing, the rumbling growls fading into silence, and as I looked around, the library no longer felt oppressive or haunted but simply old, a relic of a bygone era that had seen too much sadness. I stepped outside, the morning air fresh against my face, the horizon a canvas of oranges and pinks that promised a new beginning, the weight that had been on my shoulders lifting with each breath of clean, cool air. As I looked back at the mansion, its windows now reflecting the morning light, I knew that the spirits were at peace, the curse lifted, and the dark history of the Hawthorne family finally laid to rest. The journey had been one of discovery, of facing fears and uncovering truths that were as complex as they were dangerous, but in the end, the mansion was just a house, its halls no longer whispered with sorrow, and I, no longer a prisoner to its past, was free to leave, the legacy of the Hawthorns now a chapter closed in the annals of history. With a final glance at the serene mansion, I walked away, the sun rising behind me, casting long shadows on the path ahead, shadows that spoke not of darkness but of everything that lay out in the light, ready to be discovered.